Hi. During the summer I spent 5.5 weeks driving a huge RV, or recreational vehicle, or as we Brits go, motorhomes. It was 30 feet long, this thing, the size of a bus. And I was supporting 5 cyclists, my eldest daughter Janice, my son-in-law Dave, and 3 of their friends, Mike, Steve and Liz. And they were riding from Seattle to New York. It was a sort of to fulfill an ambition of Dave's, I think. And whilst they were doing it, they were raising money for 2 charities, motor neuron disease and multiple sclerosis. It was a really ambitious journey for 5 people in or around their 50s to ride 100 miles a day, every day, for 5.5 weeks, give or take. Some days where it was maybe only 60 miles, but they were very few and far between. The weather was incredibly hot. It was well over 100 for most of the journey. In fact, one day it was 115 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, being cyclists, you can't ride on the interstate or motorway. So all the journey was done on relatively minor roads, what we might call A roads or B roads. And the surface on some of these roads was absolutely appalling. I didn't see any potholes or melting tar, but my come, expansion joints and just terrible. Anyway, the next set of videos, and I think there are 18, together with goodness knows how many about the accommodation we stayed at on the route, are about this journey. And I suppose they're mainly of interest to the cyclists themselves, their friends and their supporters, and of course to any other idiots who fancy doing it themselves. And I was amazed just how many there were that we met. But they were taking much longer to do it, and sometimes they were taking 3 or 4 months to do it, which seemed eminently sensible. To say that the journey went smoothly would be an out-and-out lie. It was particularly fraught on occasions. And to give you my final thoughts and advice if you're ever thinking of undertaking such a jaunt, these RVs are massive. They're incredibly difficult to reverse on your own. In fact, it's almost impossible to reverse on your own. And in America, the signposts don't have place names on, or indeed mileages. All you get is a number. That's it. Now, when I was driving in towns, what looked like a little spot on the map when you arrived there was about the size of Bradford or York. And usually 3 lanes in both directions in the middle of the towns. And trying to keep your eye on the traffic, the busy traffic, and keep yourself in between the white lines of these narrow lanes, and look for road signs which just have a number, was absolutely fraught. It was one of the most stressful things I think I've ever had to do. So you need to take a companion with you. Someone who can help you find the directions and can help you when you come to reverse this thing if you miss the directions. If I missed the direction on my own and had to turn around, quite often I had to go maybe 20 miles up the road before I could find a big enough parking lot to turn this RV round in. So that was a 40-mile round trip just to get back to where I'd missed the turn. And it wasn't that this was infrequent, this was almost on a daily basis. The best thing to do is to get yourself to Walmart when you arrive and buy a sat-nav. You can get a good sat-nav at Walmart for less than $100. And when you finish with it, you can sling it to sea. This companion and you have obviously got to be compatible, because as you're following cyclists, because as you're supporting cyclists, they may be only doing 15, 17 miles an hour. So you're hopping across the United States in 15-mile strips, and after 15 miles, or even less on some hot days, you have to find somewhere to pull in, a lane end or a lay-by, and you sit there for an hour while they catch up. And then they take on board whatever they need, water, bananas, you name it, whatever we supplied. And then they set off again, and you overtake them, and down the road another 15 miles, you have to sit there again. So you need plenty of books, if you're with a companion, plenty of games for two. A good pack of cards would be a good thing. It also helps if you could take an interest in the surroundings. And quite often it was very interesting, but quite often it was just wall to wall, cone on the cob, for mile after mile after mile after mile. The second major problem we had was communications. I can only describe them as a disaster. Initially, we didn't have any. But the big problem was, when I was lost, if anything was to happen to me, the whole venture would have come to an end. And quite often I was maybe 100 miles away from where I should have been, trying to fiddle my way around back roads to get back to where I was, rather than trying to reverse this thing, this monumental vehicle. So in the end I bought a phone at Walmart. Unfortunately, it wouldn't link up with phones with foreign numbers. So the cyclist could contact me if they had a problem. But if I had a problem, I was stuffed. And if I didn't know where I was, and they then rang me and said, where are you? I wouldn't have been able to tell them where I was. If the vehicle had broken down, or I'd waxed a car, which I did within the first half hour of picking it up. I hit a motor with it, which was quite fortunate really, because having hit one car, that was the insurance excess down the river. So after that, I could have hit a car a day, and it wouldn't have made it with a difference. And the excess having disappeared. So before you even set off from wherever it is you're starting your excursion, make sure that you can communicate with one another. Because the other major problem in large parts of the United States, which are completely deserted, it's not just a few miles, it's hundreds of miles, there is no telephone cover at all. Because there's nobody there to use it apart from people in motor cars. And they're very few and far between. So even if you've got the best communications equipment, top-notch phones, if there's no mast nearby, you're stuffed. Fortunately, in those areas, it's quite difficult to get lost because there's only one blooming road. There's nowhere to turn off. So just to give you some idea of how big a problem this was, they travelled 3,500 miles. And in my RV, I did 5,035. So it was as if I'd gone all the way to New York and halfway back again. And this thing had a Ford V10 engine in it. It absolutely drank petrol. And it was about, I don't know, $3.80 a gallon. And that's an American gallon, which is slightly smaller than a British gallon. So it wasn't cheap. So this riding business from 90, 100 miles a day, every single day, just became an endurance test. The cyclists were strung out over miles on some occasions. It became a case of look after number one on numerous occasions. We would have enjoyed it so much more. So let's put it this way, I would have enjoyed it so much more if there'd been more slack. Some days they were hard pushed to complete the 100 miles. Really hard push before it became dark. And some days it was just brutal. Brutal. But anyway, we finished it. And I was very, very pleased. I was pleased for the cyclists, but I was at least pleased to finish it myself. I was more than pleased. I think the word ecstatic comes to mind. Anyway, if you intend on taking something like that, good luck to you, that's all I can say. So this was the route. Seattle to New York. It's 3,200 miles. And it takes about 50 hours by motorway. And we took 5 weeks by bike. You can follow the journey quite easily on this miracle of modern technology, Google Earth, a fantastic thing. You can even go down and look at these places from street level. And I don't doubt if you wanted details of the route, I have no doubt that they could be supplied.